Have you ever heard of a leader who carved his own country in two, creating a personal kingdom ruled by terror and a private army of black-clad horsemen? It sounds like something from a dark fantasy novel, but this was the reality in 16th century Russia under Ivan the Terrible. This wasn't just a fit of madness, it was a calculated, 7-year reign of terror known as the Oprichnina. So, how did one of Russia's most famous Tsars end up turning on his own people with such brutality? To understand the Oprichnina, we have to understand the man behind it, Ivan IV, or as history remembers him, Ivan the Terrible. His early life was a cocktail of tragedy and political intrigue. He was crowned Grand Prince of Moscow at just 3 years old, but his childhood was anything but royal. He witnessed firsthand the brutal power struggles of the boyars, Russia's powerful aristocratic families, who fought for control while he was just a figurehead. His mother was likely poisoned, and Ivan grew up in a climate of constant fear and suspicion. He felt like a prisoner in his own court, powerless and surrounded by people he believed were only looking out for themselves. This early trauma forged a deep-seated paranoia in Ivan. He was intelligent and devoutly religious, but he was also prone to explosive rages and harbored a burning resentment for the boyars, whom he saw as traitors in waiting. As he grew into his power, he consolidated his rule, expanded Russia's territory, and was even crowned the first Tsar of all the Russias. For a time, things seemed to be going well. He ruled with the help of a select council and his beloved first wife, Anastasia Romanovna. Her death in 1560 was the tipping point. Ivan was convinced the boyars had poisoned her, just like his mother. This personal tragedy, combined with military setbacks in the Livonian War, sent him spiraling. His paranoia, once a simmering ember, now erupted into a raging inferno. He believed betrayal was everywhere. In the dead of winter, 1564, Ivan did something truly shocking. He packed up his treasures, his family, and his most loyal attendants, and simply left Moscow. He settled in a fortified monastery and sent letters back to the capital. The first was to the church leaders and the boyars, accusing them of treason and corruption, and announcing his abdication from the throne. The second letter was addressed to the common people of Moscow. In it, he assured them that they were not the targets of his anger. This was a brilliant political move. The common people, who feared the return of chaotic boyar rule more than they feared their Tsar, panicked. They marched to the monastery and literally begged Ivan to return. Ivan agreed, but on one condition. He demanded the power to create a new state within the state, his own personal domain, free from the interference of the boyars and the church. This new territory was to be called the Oprichnina, an old Russian word meaning the part set aside. The rest of the country, known as the Zemshina, would continue to be administered by the old Boyar Duma. With this, Russia was effectively split in two. The Oprichnina was Ivan's personal kingdom, carved from some of the richest and most strategic lands in the country. And to enforce his will within this new domain, he created a private army, a terrifying brotherhood of about 6,000 men. They were the Oprichniki. These weren't just soldiers. They were instruments of Ivan's paranoia. Dressed head to toe in black, riding black horses, they became a symbol of impending doom. Their insignia was as terrifying as their appearance, a severed dog's head and a broom. The dog's head symbolized their mission to sniff out and bite into treason, while the broom represented their duty to sweep the traitors from the land of Russia. They swore an oath of absolute allegiance, not to the state, not to the people, but to Ivan himself. They were answerable to no one but the Tsar. Their job description was simple: to carry out Ivan's will, no matter how brutal. This meant seizing land, dispossessing noble families, and eliminating anyone Ivan deemed an enemy. The reign of the Oprichniki began almost immediately. They descended upon the estates of targeted boyar families, driving them from their homes with nothing but the clothes on their backs. These lands were then handed over to the Oprichniki as payment for their loyalty. But it quickly escalated from land seizure to outright slaughter. The Oprichniki had the power to execute anyone suspected of treason without trial, and they used this power with horrifying enthusiasm. Accusations, often baseless and fueled by personal grudges or greed, were enough to seal a person's fate. Entire families were wiped out, their property confiscated. The Oprichnina became a whirlwind of violence that spun out of control, consuming not just nobles, but clergy, merchants, and peasants alike. The paranoia of the Tsar and the lawlessness of his Oprichniki reached a fever pitch in 1570 with the massacre of Novgorod. Ivan became convinced that the entire city of Novgorod, a wealthy and historically independent-minded trading hub, was plotting to defect to his enemy, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. He saw treason in every shadow, so, leading his Oprichniki personally, Ivan marched on the city. What followed was a month-long nightmare of systematic destruction and mass murder. The Oprichniki ransacked churches, burned homes, and tortured and killed thousands of citizens. Men, women, and children were rounded up, tied together, and thrown into the icy Volkhov River. Chronicles from the time describe unspeakable horrors. The massacre was so complete that it shattered Novgorod's economic and political power for generations. It was a terrifying display of what happened when Ivan's paranoia was unleashed on a grand scale. It seems almost unbelievable, but the Oprichnina eventually collapsed under the weight of its own incompetence. While the Oprichniki were experts at terrorizing their own people, they were not an effective military force against external enemies. In 1571, the Crimean Tatars, sensing weakness and division in Russia, launched a massive raid. They bypassed the border defenses, marched on Moscow, and burned the city to the ground. The Great Oprichniki Army, which was supposed to defend the realm, proved utterly useless. They failed to stop the invasion, and the capital was left in ashes. This catastrophic failure was a harsh reality check for Ivan. The Oprichnina had not made Russia stronger, it had crippled it. It had decimated the aristocracy, disrupted the economy, and failed to protect the country from its real enemies. The very tool he had created to secure his power had nearly led to its complete destruction. Faced with this undeniable disaster, Ivan the Terrible did what only a true autocrat could do. He simply abolished it. In 1572, he disbanded the Oprichniki. The name Oprichnina itself was forbidden, as if Ivan wanted to erase this dark chapter from history. Some of the leading Oprichniki were executed, becoming the final victims of the very system they had so brutally enforced. The Oprichnina lasted only 7 years, but its legacy was deep and devastating. It left Russia economically ruined, politically fractured, and socially traumatized. Thousands upon thousands of people were dead, the old aristocratic class was shattered, and a culture of fear and absolute obedience to the Tsar was cemented into the Russian psyche. Many historians argue that the Oprichnina wasn't just a paranoid fantasy, but a brutal, calculated campaign by Ivan to crush any potential opposition and forge a new kind of state-of-true autocracy where the Tsar's power was absolute and unquestionable. He destroyed the old power structures of the boyars and replaced them with a new service nobility loyal only to him. In a dark and bloody way, he succeeded. The story of the Oprichnina is a chilling reminder of how a leader's personal fears can shape the destiny of a nation, and how the pursuit of absolute power can lead to absolute terror. It's a dark mirror reflecting the dangers of unchecked authority. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this dive into one of history's darkest chapters interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the past. Let me know in the comments what historical event you'd like to see covered next. See you in the next video.